In the next few minutes, you'll learn how to format an ESIA monitoring plan, how to avoid some of the common pitfalls, and come out looking like a true professional. Before we dive in, let's talk about Sarah. Sarah is an experienced environmental impact assessor. She landed a complex ESIA project, but she wasn't worried because she meticulously crafted the initial assessment, and she was very confident in her team's ability to predict the environmental and social impacts on a community. She thought the monitoring plan would just take care of itself. After all, they had done such a great job with the predictions. But a few months after the project was deployed, they started getting stakeholder calls. People were complaining about raccoons in their trash cans, bears in their backyard, and basically displaced wildlife that had overtaken their suburban community. Sarah's team had predicted a lower wildlife impact, and they figured the wildlife would resettle in a neighboring forest, but that's not what happened. And they had to scramble to come up with a last-minute solution because they had not put one in their monitoring plan. So Sarah and her team learned a valuable lesson, that an effective EIA monitoring plan really demands attention. So let's talk about the basics first. Environmental impact assessment monitoring involves collecting and analyzing data after the fact. This can involve monitoring water quality, or it could mean surveying local communities to see how they're feeling about a project deployed in their community. Now, an EIA monitoring plan is also required for regulatory compliance in many cases. It also provides a proactive impact management approach, where you're not just waiting for people to call in and complain, but you're out there looking and monitoring for impacts so you can catch them before they become a problem. So some of the key things that come out of a good EIA monitoring plan are, of course, you're verifying your impact predictions. You're detecting and mitigating impacts as they come in. And so real-time monitoring is helping you detect unexpected negative impacts. But you're also building stakeholder trust. A lot of communities fear that once a big development project is done, everybody leaves and they're left with whatever consequences may come. By implementing and communicating a transparent environmental monitoring plan, you're letting residents know that they can trust your organization and that you have their back when it comes to unintended consequences. Okay, so let's take a simple look at tracking environmental impacts and what your monitoring plan is going to be about. First of all, when you're doing an environmental impact assessment, you're establishing the baseline conditions. So you find out what the impacts are going to be, and let's say one of those impacts is decreased air quality. So first, you need to establish the baseline. Before the project begins, what is the average air quality in that area? And then you input those as a baseline in your assessment. Next, you'll predict the project impacts on that indicator. The indicator is air quality. Based upon what you know about the project, based upon different models and expert analysis that may be out there, you'll predict how the air quality will change. How will it change during the construction phase? And how will it change during the operation phase, or basically after the project is finished and deployed? So you might say that during the construction phase, air quality will decrease 15%. And you might say during the operation phase, once construction's complete, air quality will go back to normal within 60 days. How do you know if those predictions are actually what happens? And that is where your monitoring plan comes in. Your monitoring plan confirms what actually happens in comparison with what was predicted. So it would include collecting air quality data during both the construction phase and the operation phase. You might find that air quality is actually decreased 20%, higher than you estimated. You might also find that air quality returns to normal in just 30 days. So the monitoring really helps you tie up the entire assessment. This is how the site was before the project. These are the impacts that were predicted. And this is actually what happened. Let's see how you're going to put that plan together. Step 1, you want to define your monitoring objectives. Do you have compliance regulations to meet? Are you validating predictions only? Or are you also looking for early warning of adverse impacts? So once you've defined those objectives, next you're going to select your impact indicators in step 2. And really, during your assessment and the collection of baseline data, you would have identified expected impacts. So when you're looking at things to monitor, you want to look at both the expected impacts, but you also want to look at anything else you might need to monitor as an unexpected impact. Step 3, specify the monitoring methods. How are you going to collect the data? And so your monitoring methods will match those indicators. If an indicator is water quality, then you're going to use a water quality test. If another indicator is people's access to medical care, then you might send out a survey to the community. Step 4, you're going to assign who is going to do what. Once you decide what's going to be measured and how it's going to be measured, then you need to assign who's going to do it, how often they're going to do it, and ensure they have the right tools. 5 is data management. Once you start collecting that monitoring data, how are you going to put it into an easy format to see charts and reports? And a digital platform is really going to be your best bet to do it efficiently. Reporting and communication decisions are next. Who needs to know about the findings? How are you going to tell them about the findings? And how often are you going to report on monitoring data? And then finally, step 7, establish a corrective action process. This is one area where Sarah and her team really could have been helped. They had no corrective action process in place. So when they started getting angry calls about animals in backyards, they had to scramble to figure out what to do. If you already have a corrective action plan in place for handling unexpected impacts, then the process is much smoother and your team can get out ahead of unexpected impacts. So what are some of the common challenges that people like Sarah and others run into, even if they're experienced assessors? The first is inadequate baseline data. Your baseline data is really one of the first steps in identifying those impacts that you're going to monitor on the other side. So you want to collect data early and update that data regularly. Next is poor data quality. Make sure you train your staff in the standardized methods of collecting the data that you need to collect during the monitoring process and ensure they have the tools they need to do it. Insufficient stakeholder engagement is another big one. Send out surveys. Let people know that you care about their opinions and how you're going to address them. Also, disclose the results of monitoring surveys. That will build stakeholder trust. Data overload is another big one. Make sure you're focused on the priority indicators and use automated tools that will distill that data down and provide that real-time reporting, as well as charts and analytics that you can easily share with others to illustrate the data in a way they'll understand. Here's an example of how you may lay out your environmental impact monitoring plan. First, what are you measuring? What is the main impact category? Next, what's the indicator, or what exactly are you going to measure? For example, air quality. You might measure the PM10 levels. Or noise. You may measure the decibel level at the site perimeter. For something like community safety, you might measure the number of safety reports. Next, how often are you going to measure? What's the frequency? Is it weekly, monthly, or something else? And who's responsible for measuring? You want to make sure you delegate so everybody knows what they're in charge of and what's expected of them. If you found this video helpful, go ahead and subscribe to our channel. And if you could use customizable templates, assessment tools, and more expert tips and guidance, just head over to assessmentstools.com. You'll find all that and more.